What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Sports Card Strategy Show. This is a special edition. We're going to cover top cards for cinematic athletes today. And you're hearing different music in the background because it is a special edition. I'm Paul Hickey with NoOffseason.com, and I have a special guest today. His name is Jason Glassman. And I'm going to let him introduce himself in a second. But Jason essentially has motivated me to talk about the top cinematic athletes and their sports cards. So we're going to get into that in a second. Jason is a screenwriter, among other things, very creative guy. But before we get into Jason, I'm going to do a little bit of promotion for those of you who listen to the Sports Card Strategy Show. You know, right now it's Thursday, September 1st. We're going live, and you're preparing for your fantasy football drafts still. So check out our Dominator draft kit at nooffseason.com/fantasy. And for those of you who are interested in getting into sports cards more and more, this episode's going to help you out because we're going to talk about the top cinematic athletes, and we're going to get into their sports cards for those of you interested in sports card investing. But I've got an amazing promo that I haven't talked about yet on the Sports Card Strategy Show. And I want to start giving out a free premium subscription for a year at nooffseason.com. So we have the Sports Card Investment Report, and I want to give away free subscriptions for the entire year at nooffseason.com. But what you have to do is you have to email me at paul@nooffseason.com to find out how. So get a free premium subscription at nooffseason.com. Build your sports card investment portfolio. To figure out how, email me at paul@nooffseason.com and just ask me how the heck to get a free nooffseason.com premium subscription for the year. Okay, so that's all of our promo. I'm excited to talk to Jason today.
Me too.
Like I said, Jason is a talented screenwriter, creative guy. He wrote an article on Medium called Top 100 Cinematic Athletes. Jason, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you and I are talking today?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Paul, talking with you. I really like this setup. I liked your music, by the way.
Thanks, man. Little dance pop intro.
Yeah, got me in the mood. So if any of you are like me, you enjoy your sport films. And while I have my favorites, it didn't dawn on me, this list. I had COVID about a month ago, and I binge watched as much as I could. And I saw something on Michael Jordan, I think on The Last Dance. And I started wondering about other sport heroes of mine. And I sort of flashed back to the ESPN Sports Century, where in 1999, they made a list, Michael Jordan being number one, obviously, as it should have been, as the number one athlete of the century. And then it occurred to me, but what about some of these other athletes that, due to the fact that they're not real people, don't get on that list, but yet they're still inspiring, although they're not real. They do speak to most of us in the same way a Michael Jordan or Muhammad Ali might speak to others. And so I conjured up this list of 100. I had to make some edits. And I'm sure Paul will call me out of it on it, made some glaring non-ads. But it was a list of the 100 best cinematic athletes ranked of all time. And here's the article if you want to read it. It's primarily a big list, but it took a couple days of COVID research and just nostalgia. And from there, I was able to sort of make my top 25, and then from 26 to 100, it became a little bit more, I think, subjective or biased on many levels. So here's the list. As you can see, number one, and I don't know your feeling on my number one, is Rocky. I mean, how can you not have Rocky be the number one cinematic athlete of all time?
No, I agree. I think it's hard to argue with Rocky. And just to chime in here, so for those of you watching on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, if you're watching, you see Jason's article, medium.com / Jason Glassman 12. You can find the article, the 100 greatest cinematic athletes of all time ranked. He's got Rocky number 1, Roy Hobbs from The Natural number 2. He's got a lot of other classic athletes on here. So Daniel LaRusso from The Karate Kid, Jimmy Chitwood from Hoosiers, Apollo Creed from Rocky. Really some fun ones, obviously, like we all love Happy Gilmore, Ricky Bobby, but then even Forrest Gump on here for football, ping pong, running. And so when Jason sent this to me, it got me thinking, these guys most of these athletes should have cards. And so Jason and I talked, and we decided to do this special edition podcast of the Sports Card Strategy Show, talking about not only his list, which we'll talk more about, but then we'll get into some research that I did around the sports cards that each of these athletes have and what some investment opportunities are. So stay tuned throughout this episode as I will break that down with Jason. So I want to give him an opportunity to continue to go through his list, and then feel free to comment if you're watching live. We'll take your comment. And then obviously, if you're not watching live, we'd love to know in the comments what you guys think of all of this. And like Jason said, he feels like, I want to ask you, actually, that's a good segue to ask you. So you've got Rocky number 1. Continue to go through your list, but maybe also start to point out any criticism that because you've shared this list. It's been talked about on some radio stations, some other podcasts. It's been picked up by some other media. Is there anything that you feel like more confident about based on that feedback, or like you mentioned, some glaring things that maybe you should have added? What initial reaction have you got from the list as you kind of walk us through?
Well, first I want to make sure everyone understands the criteria. So
yeah, good call.
So if you look at this list, if you find this list, every athlete on here is fictional. So you can't be a biopic, because then it just becomes, because every major athlete has had a biopic about them. So it has to be fictional. And the sport has to be real. So the sport itself can't be a fictional sport, like Quidditch, although that is a real sport in some East Coast schools, I believe. But you can't be a wizard. So you can't have magic either. So you can't be like a fictional character who finds a pair of magic socks and becomes like Mike. So it has to be raw, freakish talent. Now,
you can, however, get injured in a little league
game. I was going to say, Henry Rowan Gardner hurt his arm, and he became, and it involves the Cubs, and I am an avid Cub fan, so he had to make that list, and I think he made it in the top probably 25, at least.
Love
the
that.
50.
Rowan Gardner's 26, but yeah.
Okay, so purely fictional, non-biopic. It could be inspired, because arguably people could say, and I haven't heard it yet, Rocky is inspired by a fighter, but it's not a real match. It's not a sort of clear cut. So it can be inspired by, because you have a character like the Whammer, who arguably is, you could say, why is he on that list at number 9? But in that movie, he's perceived as the greatest hitter of all time, because when he faces Roy Hobbs in the carnival and he strikes him out on 3 pitches, it says more about Roy Hobbs as the Whammer, as his foil in that scene, than it does about the Whammer. But it elevates Roy Hobbs. Now, Roy Hobbs.
Okay, so is that a reason why you've got Roy Hobbs number 2?
Roy Hobbs number 2 is the greatest baseball player of all time, according to Pop Fisher. Okay. And he would have been the greatest athlete of all time if he didn't get shot by the lady in black. Now, and she
Okay.
even says, "Are you the greatest athlete of all time?" before she pulls the trigger. And if you watch that movie, as much as I have seen that movie, and it still holds up, I believe, he himself is almost magical in that sense, especially when you see the home run last swing into the lights at Wrigley Field where they filmed it. So I felt he was the greatest baseball player of all time, but in the fictional sense. So
Okay. No, we'll come back to number 3 here in a second, but because you're talking about Roy Hobbs being the greatest baseball player of all time in the fictional sense, as I was researching your list, because full disclosure, like Jason is movie expert, book. I mean, he's probably one of the most well-read people that I know. And so in terms of like um, anything that's been created as anything that's been written, so whether it's been a screenplay or a book, Jason knows about it. And so he's the perfect person to have put together this list. And he is a huge sports. He's very knowledgeable when it comes to sports and collectibles as well. He went to the National in Chicago in 2001. So he's the perfect person to put together this list. So who am I to question him? But the fun thing about this list is that we all have our opinions and we all have our questions. So one thing I did not know was about a guy named Steve Nebraska. I had never heard of Steve Nebraska. I had never heard of the Scout. So a minute ago when you said Roy Hobbs is the greatest fictional baseball player of all time, when I read Steve Nebraska's fake true story on a blog that I found, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And this guy seems like Shohei Ohtani on every single performance enhancing drug he could possibly be on. Talk to us about Steve Nebraska before we go, and maybe some of the other baseball players on here before we
Yeah, I mean, not a great movie. It's Brendan Fraser when he was at the sort of apex of his career, and Albert Brooks is the Scout. And he, it's got this sort of Sid Finch type of mystique. I don't know if you remember Sid Finch was I think Peter Gammons wrote it for Sports Illustrated like 30 something years ago about this prospect who can throw 125-mile-per-hour fastball. He's in the Mets organization. Everyone was clamoring to get a sort of interview with this person, but it wasn't a real pitcher. It was a fictional character that Peter Gammons made up to sort of talk about in a literary sense about hype in sports. And so there's this sort of celluloid version of Sid Finch who is now, Steve Nebraska. And if you can throw 125-mile-per-hour fastball, even if you're in the Mexican League, and it also deal with the only problem with Steve Nebraska is he's got some neurodiversity issues, and he has to work through that so he can actually play at the major league level. So he not only overcame some crippling anxiety, but he could throw almost doubly fast than Kyle Hendricks can throw a fastball.
So is Roy Hobbs over Steve? So you had to take into account like the quality of the film, the quality of the actor.
Well, I tried to not do. I mean, if you look at Roy Hobbs, also one of the pivotal scenes in that movie is when one of the players, I forget the exact player, notices lightning bolt on his baseball bat, right? And then they all start putting on the lightning bolt patches, and they end up all playing as a team. So one of the things about Roy Hobbs, it's not just he's a great baseball player, great hitter, purely a perfect hitter. He's also an amazing pitcher. He struck out the Whammer. He also inspired his team to become, sort of like this Michael Jordan without, screaming and punching. He was able to softly inspire change within that whole organization. So his heroics were not just behind, standing, right side of home plate. It was his ability to, create something out of, a pile of dung. So that elevated. What's that?
He had the intangibles, right?
He is. And so it would be, I'd be remiss in not saying it's morely the film that got him up there, because part of collecting in and of itself, one of the aspects of it is this pride in collecting history, or pride in collecting your nostalgic history, personal nostalgic history. And so for me, Roy Hobbs was a movie my father and I would watch together. I still, my favorite number, if I was actually good at sports, would be number 9, not only for Roy Hobbs, but also the Bears' greatest quarterback, after
Jim
Buckman is
McMahon, baby.
dead. So
Love Jim McMahon.
so yeah, I think any one of these top 10, you could argue.
Yeah. No, there's a couple. Okay, so there's a couple questions I have for you within the top 10. A few. And it might be that I'm not as well versed in the movies as you are. But I am familiar with Gladiator. I'm questioning combat as a sport. Why is Gladiator? Have you gotten any pushback on that one from anyone else? Defend your Maximus Decimus Meridius combat call at number 3 with Russell Crowe. What's up with that?
Wait, hold on. I lost you at.
Okay. Basically, the question is, how is combat a sport, and why is Maximus Decimus Meridius number 3? Okay, looks like we lost Jason. I'm going to keep rolling here and talk a little bit about the list, and I'm sure we'll get him back in the show. Yeah, here he is. Okay, so hold on, Jason. I'm going to get you back in the stream here. Okay, so we lost you for a second. I was just recapping my question. Maximus Decimus Meridius, Gladiator number 3. My question is, the two-part question. The decision to make combat a sport and put it in here, is it in fact a sport? And was the decision to make it a sport just so that you could get Maximus Decimus Meridius on the list? And if so, why is he well, if so, or even if not, independently of that, why is he number 3? I know it's a classic movie, but I need you to defend this here.
Okay.
And jump in the comments what you guys think of this.
It is a sport. If you remember the movie, it was painted as sort of this historical football. You had the music, you had and he's number 3 because they're fighting to the death.
Okay. All right.
So sure, if you have a football player or a basketball or even gymnast or ice skater, they're not doing it to the death. So he's actually fighting animals, beasts with weapons. And I figured, there's no greater risk and no greater form of heroics than survival in the ring. So, so that was my number 3. So if it was anything lower,
it is a sport in the movie. So that answers my biggest question. So that,
it is a sport in real life too. I mean, they're the accolades of the gladiators.
I suppose.
Well, yes. So I figured anything lower than the top 5, then it becomes sort of a novelty pick.
Okay.
Because, so I had to put it, and personally, there's no better athlete at number 1, from my opinion, than Rocky. And the reason that I think is, people could question, Rocky is the modern sort of archetypal underdog, right? When you think of if you think of the Karate Kid or any movie, it's a modern, and I hate to say modern because the movie is 1976, but a modern day adaptation of Rocky. So the idea of Rocky, in a bigger sense, he cut the mold for some of these great cinematic athletes, because most of them,
certainly, when you look at the Karate Kid 1 through 3 and Cobra Kai, so Jason has Daniel LaRusso, who played by Ralph Macchio, as martial arts, which of course is a sport. I won't question that. Number 5. Did you give any additional points to the fact that this is a this is a trilogy plus one, and then same thing with
No,
Rocky. Like, okay, so
no,
no extra points for that.
no extra points. I mean, if you're looking at it in that sense, then the reason why it's a trilogy plus one, because it is a sort of cultural touchstone, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, one of the things which is tangential to this, and maybe a separate list, Karate Kid wouldn't have been, Daniel-san wouldn't have been the champion without Mr. Miyagi. So the question then becomes, who are the greatest coaches, and could I add
Right.
any coaches? Because I wanted to add, Coach Taylor would be my number one.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And you have Mr. Miyagi, you have Ted Lasso, and I was able to sort of finagle Ted Lasso at the bottom of the list due to his expertise at darts. And if you've seen Ted Lasso,
Which was my favorite thing that you did in this entire list was that, which you just said, getting Ted Lasso on the list. When I read the list, I was like, wait a minute, he made a mistake. He's a coach. And then I was like, nope, darts.
Yeah, so
brilliant move by you on that one.
But it was, iconic in the sense of the coach is as important a role in these movies as there is. If you go to Roy Hobbs, you have Pop Fisher. If you go to Rocky, you have Mickey. So it's like, without these sort of sidekicks, so to speak, in the films, then these characters wouldn't be the champions that they become. And you have to peek under sort of the story magic to see who is the sort of sidekick. I have Will Ferrell's and John Hader's Chaz Michaels, and that's another one, the partnership.
Yep.
So, Will Ferrell made this list, and
they're up high. So yeah, Chaz Michaels and Jimmy McElroy are 16 together as a duo.
Right. So I did a couple
duos on here.
I did a couple together. The Hinson brothers, because from Slapshot is high up on that list. There is White Man Can't Jump. So iconic sports film and great street ball players, but they're recognized as sort of a duo. And so they made that list. Now, Friday Night Lights, since I did television as well, that was a hard choice to pick which character from the TV show. The movie is too closely based on a true story, where the TV show is once removed from that. So I figured I could get away with it. So Vince
Howard. Yep. Vince Howard, number 28. He was my favorite Friday Night Lights athlete. So I'm glad you had him on there. He was, of course, the quarterback of the East Dillon Lions.
Right.
So he's also played by Michael B. Jordan, who's on this list also a couple spots later as Adonis Creed, right? Adonis Hollywood Creed, from Creed 1 through 3, number 31. So you've got Michael B. Jordan on here multiple times, and you were about to say something about Will Ferrell. Is he on here multiple times?
Yeah, so we have him as Chaz Michaels and Ricky Bobby. He's also there as Jackie Moon from Semi Pro. And he's up there pretty high because, according to the film's legend, he created, and I want to use a spoiler, the alley-oop. And so the whole alley-oop pass creation pushed him pretty high up on that list. Now, here's a couple, I've had some pushback on some of the characters. Jeff Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High for surfing, and Roger Murdoch, played by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar from the movie Airplane. And the pushback was, well, we never saw them play. So we never actually witnessed their heroics on the screen, which then opens up a floodgate of other characters. Al Bundy, for example, from Married with Children. We never seen him play, but he sort of definitely lets the audience know of the legend that he was as a football player. And then just through sort of, people's comments, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like, one was a movie that you might not have seen or remembered, which was with Rodney Dangerfield, known for his role in Caddyshack, but also as Thornton Mellon. And he was a college diver.
Okay.
And very funny movie, and the name of the movie is totally slipped my mind. And there's a sketch, a Saturday Night Live sketch that's been going viral again, and it's one of my favorites, with Martin Short and Harry Shearer, and they're sort of middle-aged synchronized swimmers that are trying out for the Olympics. And so these are, memorable, great, comedic, cinematic athletes, but they just didn't make the cut.
So so a lot of thought and research had to go into this, and a lot of some interesting pushback that I wouldn't have thought of. So I'm glad you brought that up, like the Roger Murdoch example, and then and so Al Bundy, for those of you listening, is not on the list, but Roger Murdoch is. So question for you: I haven't really seen Airplane. I know the movie. I know the scene where Kareem's flying the plane as Roger Murdoch. Now, in that movie, is it clear to the viewer that Roger Murdoch / Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is in fact a basketball player?
Yes, because a kid basically confronts the Roger Murdoch character, or the Kareem character, that his father thinks he's lazy on the court. And
love it.
Classic movie.
And it's hard to leave the all-time leading scorer in the history of professional basketball off of the list when he is in fact playing the part of Roger Murdoch. So I could see, was that essentially the reason why you had him in there? And then Al Bundy, who just supposedly, according to himself, scored 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think for me, I didn't even think about Al Bundy.
Okay.
But Roger Murdoch, Airplane was one of those movies that I saw as a kid, probably 24 times. Another one on this list that did not make the list was Patrick Swayze in Point Break for surfing.
Okay.
Or Keanu's role in Point Break as well. But
man, I would have never even thought about some of these. Like, if I would have done this list, I probably would have totally overlooked surfing, ping pong. I probably would have overlooked gymnastics, horse racing. You did an amazing job so arm wrestling.
Oh, come on. You got to know that Lincoln from Over the Top, it is a sport. It is on ESPN2 or maybe even ESPN Ocho. But
there you go.
If you haven't seen Over the Top, then you truly are not a Rocky Sylvester Stallone. I mean, you could even argue that Cliffhanger, his role as a mountain climber,
mountain climbing. Yeah, I could see that.
So some of these others, like, for example, someone asked, why is it here? If you go up to the top here, the top 10. Okay, if you look at the top 10, if you have, you have the Hanson brothers, Alexis Winston. I don't know if this was a movie I watched growing up called Ice Castles. And it was about a blind figure skater.
Okay.
So I figured if you're a blind Olympic figure skater, you could argue, well, that's a one-time thing. Did she win multiple championships? But I also wanted our list to reflect. We also have, if we look at just the female athletes alone, Dorothy Dottie Hinson from
Absolutely. And we're going to get into that too in a minute when we get into the cards portion of this show. But yeah, sorry, keep going.
And you look at one of my all-time favorite baseball movies, probably my number one favorite top 5 sport movie, number 1 baseball movie. And it flips between the sort of fantasy element of the natural, but is the Bad News Bears. Okay. And so I have several Bad News Bears, and I could have put the whole lineup on there.
Yeah.
And Buttermaker would have been on that coach list for sure. But if we look at what number is my, I think it's Yeah, Amanda Wurlitzer, Tatum O'Neal's character
Yep.
in Bad News Bears, who Buttermaker promises to pay for her ballet lessons if she pitches for them, and she's lights out pitcher for the North County Bears. But you also have Engelbert and Kelly Leak, who's on there as well. Tanner Boyle would have been great on there, but he just didn't make the cut. Now, animals, there are animals on here too. So
I'm glad you brought that up, because can I give you shit about one more before I give you props about everything else?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know I saw a couple animals on here. I don't have a problem with Air Bud playing basketball.
Okay.
But how is sheep herding?
That's a sport. It's a sport.
How is sheep herding a sport? Did you just feel like you had to get Babe on the list, and so you're making up that sheep herding is a sport?
First of all, it is a sport. If you watch the movie, there's a crowd there.
Okay, is it like a 4-H type thing?
No, this is what, somewhere outside of London in a and where I forgot what country, if it's England or if it's Ireland, but it's a sport. And Babe not only competes in this sport, but he transcends his perceived animal race. He breaks barriers here.
Okay, I see where you're
going.
You could
argue in a similar sense is Jackie Robinson in baseball.
I never thought we'd ever talk about Babe on the Sports Card Strategy Show. Babe the
I bet
Pig.
There's a Babe sports card.
And I never thought we would compare Babe the Pig to Jackie Robinson, but as you were saying that, I know what you're saying. I mean, it's
I'm not comparing with Jackie Robinson on a human animal level. I'm comparing his ability to transcend his and compete in a sport that he's not permitted to.
Of course, yeah.
And he becomes a sheepdog against all odds. And
that's true.
His owner says, "You've done good, pig." But you also have, Air Bud. You have Gus, a movie from I think the late '60s, early '70s with Don Knotts, and Gus is a donkey that could punt and kick.
Okay, I was not familiar with.
I just for some reason I remember that movie, and then Black Stallion. I figured if you looked at that Sports Century list, there was several. Secretariat, Seabiscuit made that list. So most horse racing movies are based on true stories. It's about the jockey like Seabiscuit and Seabiscuit during the Depression, based on that book and the movie, and then Secretariat based on the real horse. But the Black Stallion was a fictional book movie when I was a kid, and he made the list. Now the last one, number 100, I picked, in its relevance to the Field of Dreams, was Ray Kinsella.
Yep.
So you could argue that he should not be on the list, but for me, Ray Kinsella, plowed under his crop to bring a Magic Baseball field into existence, which allowed some of the historic greats, specifically Joe Jackson, to return to the game of baseball. So while he played college baseball poorly. His father had a cup of coffee in the 30s or 40s, but his role in the whole sort of tome of sport film, everyone, if you build it, he will come.
You got to try to squeeze Ray Kinsella in there. And I think, he went out on the field and played catch.
Yeah. So catch, maybe.
So baseball, I think
the best baseball
close enough.
Catch.
I feel better about him than Babe, but that's okay. I'll let you have it. You made a good enough argument. And I want to know what the audience thinks of everything here. Okay. So, great stuff. So you've heard from Jason a little bit about his rationale and some of the feedback he's had on the list. He would love more of your feedback, as would I. So let us know what you think. But I'm gonna just rattle off a few other things that I noticed about the list. So, okay, love the movie Major League. There's several Major League characters on the list. There's, of course, Ricky Wild Thing Vaughn, Jake Taylor, Pedro Serrano, Willie Mays Hayes. I love the movie Blue Chips. So you had Shaq's character Neon Budo in here. That's awesome. Of course, Saved by the Bell. AC Slater is on here. He Got Game. Jesus Shuttlesworth. Steamin' Willie Beeman from Any Given Sunday. These are all my guys here that I really, really like in my life from a cinematic perspective. The Ted Lasso characters, Roy Kent and Ted Lasso, are in here. Roy Kent for soccer and Ted Lasso for darts. Gordon Bombay from Mighty Ducks is a good one that I'm familiar with. A lot of Sandlot characters, great movie. Sandlot characters in here. Uncle Drew was one that I thought had to be on here. You've got him at number 30. Just that dude can ball like ridiculous. So well done on that one. We talked about Will Ferrell's characters in terms of Ricky Bobby and Chaz Michaels. We have not talked about Adam Sandler yet. He's obviously a big sports movie person. So Adam Sandler's on here a couple of times, right? Bobby Boucher Jr., Happy Gilmore. Is Adam Sandler? Am I missing any other Adam Sandlers on here?
I couldn't recall other
I think those are the big two. I mean, Waterboy and Happy Gilmore. So that's big. Now there is actually, that's a great, I didn't even mean this to be a great segue that it is, but you had not watched Hustle.
Oh yeah. So it's that day, and that just came out, right?
That just came out this year, 2022, a few months ago, and there are some cards from the movie Hustle. We're about to get in the cards aspect of this discussion here because it'll allow us to continue the discussion that we're having, but talk about it from a cards angle. But Bo Cruz is the big prospect, played by Juancho Hernan Gomez, who is an active NBA player. But Stanley Sugarman is Adam Sandler's character in that movie, and he did play at Temple. So after you watch that movie, you may want to update that's the fun thing about this list, right? I mean, it's probably something that you can amend as movies
like I wanted
to come out. And
there's a couple I would add to that list. Like I said, the Rodney Dangerfield character, Ham from Sandlot, is not on the list, and I feel he probably should end up
nice. Yeah, but even Roy McAvoy was one that we both thought should be on the list. He's number 84. He's obviously Tin Cup, so that's cool. All right, so anything else you want to add or talk about before we open up the sports cards or trading cards discussion part of this list, rather?
No, I think, like you said, these are, interesting to see the value that the whole idea of the value, for example, I mean, in the news, obviously, Mickey Mantle baseball card just sold for $16.2 million. Yeah. And the value 12.6. Okay. Sorry. Yep. 12.6 million. And so it's curious, what a first or a near mint or mint Rocky card would sell for, a Charizard or Pikachu card, or even a Magic Gathering cards. They've sold, over $1 million. So it's interesting the value that we attach to the cards and the athletes behind the cards. And so, we're talking about rankings of, imaginary heroes, how we rank them on a sort of financial or a grade it's interesting to see.
Right, absolutely. And so from a cards perspective, I mean, many of you may be familiar with this, but some of you may be wondering, like, how do you assign value to a cinematic athlete's card? And I think I'll kind of walk you through some of the logic and some of the research that I found. So I took Jason's list and I put it into a spreadsheet, and I went onto eBay and looked at sold listings. I did a lot of searches and found sold listings of a lot of these athletes do have cards. Now, I'll get into some specifics, but essentially some rules that I've found as I was going through this are to have real value. The number one thing needs to be cards that are licensed by a reputable trading card manufacturer. And that's why Rocky cards are investable, because there was a 1979 Topps release of Rocky 2 trading cards. So for example, this box, which was not sealed, as you can see from the photo, the box is not sealed, but the packs inside the box had 34 sealed packs inside. That sold on June 30th this year for $178.50. So a pretty substantial sale for cinematic athlete, although one could argue that could be a pretty good bargain, in that, 34 packs for under $200. But the other thing I noticed, and we'll go through some specific examples. So not only has Topps made cards that are licensed to a particular movie or show, but there are what are called ACEO cards, which essentially stands for artist creation, like a individual artist creating an art card that have become popular. Typically, they are modeled after historic Topps releases, or in this case, Ricky Wild Thing Vaughn. This is a Fleer release, but Ricky Wild Thing Vaughn also has, and many of these athletes do. Kenny Powers has one, which I'm a big fan of Kenny Powers. But a lot of times an artist will take a classic designed Topps or Fleer or Donruss design of a baseball card or of a trading card, and they will come up with their own interpretation of that. So this, as you can see up in the top right-hand corner, says flops.
Right.
For Ricky Vaughn, but so it's not a licensed card, but it is an artist card, and it did sell and has been selling for $8.10 each. So these are real sales, and I think just so number one would be like an officially licensed card from a manufacturer for a movie or a show. But those are few and far between, as I found. What are super popular are not only the artist creations card, but there is an artist named Kyler Smith. And I don't know if any of you have heard of him. Jump in the comments if you have, or if you haven't. But a guy named Kyler Smith has a website where he sells his own custom art cards, where he draws them. And he does, what I like about it is he drops them in a limited release single format. So it's very similar to those of you who are familiar with Topps Now, Panini Instant. There are more and more releases of these single cards that are limited edition. So on the backs of his cards, he will hand numbered, like number 48 out of 99, etc. And so you actually have, like here's on my screen right now is a Neon Boudreaux. You've got the Chaz Michaels and Jimmy McElroy. These sell for $20 a piece, but these guys so on his website, he sells them for $20 a piece in a limited edition standpoint, but they resell on eBay for much more. So for example, Roy Kent, there have been 2 recent sales of a Kyler Smith Roy Kent card, one for $100 and one for $110 in August. This Roy Kent card, where he's flipping the bird as the coach of Richmond in the championship league after they were relegated to the championship league. So from an investability standpoint, you've got 2 different angles here, Jason. You've got the officially licensed card, and then you've got a signed limited edition artist rendering. This is number 195 out of 275 for this guy, Kyler Smith, who I would advise all of you in the audience who are not familiar with Kyler Smith to check him out, because his cards are super investable. We've got a comment here. So Ryan Elliott, thanks for watching and commenting. He says a good sports card investor's April Fool's joke might come to fruition. The next thing we know, G.I. Joe is going to be hot. I think he's potentially referring to the Jake Paul Pokemon prank, where Jake Paul, I think was the Paul brother who bought the multi-million-dollar Pokemon box that had G.I. Joe cards in it. So that's a good one. So no, I mean, I think like I highlighted here on this list, Jason. So let me know what you think of this. There's a couple other. So back to the like officially licensed thing.
Right.
There's Allen and Ginter is a Topps brand, and they will do a bunch of different kind of stuff. And so they'll do like this Drago, who's number 22 on your list, has one of the most expensive sold cards. And the reason why is because it's Dolph Lundgren autograph, but it's licensed as Drago, and it's a PSA 10.
Wow.
So this is kind of like a unicorn of the world that you're talking about, where you've got a top 100 cinematic athlete of all time. So obviously there's nostalgia, there's awareness, there's, but then you've got Topps manufactured an Allen and Ginter branded card as Drago, signed by the actor, and also in the highest possible gem mint grade by the #1 grading company in the world for reselling cards on the secondary market. And so as a result, you have the seller listed it at $599, but accepted a best offer of $352. So this is a real sale. So this is really what got me excited about your list, because I was like, holy crap, like I could take this list from a guy like Jason who knows his stuff as it relates to not only pop culture, but just relevance in the cinematic history of these athletes, which is an indicator of some investability. And then I can cross-reference that with the knowledge that I have about sports cards and what makes them investable. And sure enough, you've got this formula where like these Roy Kent cards, this Drago card, really can actually be like some investable assets here.
What's this? The White Man Can't. Yeah, let me see this one.
Okay, so the White Men Can't Jump is a what I found is that this Kyler Smith artist is extremely successful, and he has these cards that are going for, when he makes a card and he drops a card, they go for $20 a piece, but on the secondary market, it's out of control in terms of what they sell for. So there was okay, here it is. Sorry. See original listing for this White Man Can't Jump card. So this sold as a pair. So they're each Kyler Smith cards. 2 Kyler Smith cards, one of Billy Hoyle, played by Woody Harrelson, and one of Sidney Dean, played by Wesley Snipes. Sold as a pair. Best offer accepted of $280. So $140 per card. Now these were sold on Kyler Smith's website once upon a time for $20 each. So definitely a play can be made as we go to Kyler Smith's website and we look at things that are still available. Will Neon Boudreaux, will Chaz Michaels and Jimmy McElroy, will they have the popularity? Like, first of all, they've got to sell out on Kyler's website. Right. So you've got to time it to where you get one of the last remaining of these cards. And then once they're sold out, you got to hope that their popularity increases so that then you can sell them on the secondary market for a profit. But I mean, you look at Adonis Hollywood Creed still available, Joey Tribbiani card still available. Joey Tribbiani's not on your list based on your criteria for obvious reasons, but Adonis Hollywood Creed is on your list.
Right.
You can go get, now this is a design that looks like a Panini Donruss rated rookie design. It doesn't say rated rookie on it, but this is the design that Kyler's going for. And it's a pretty badass picture of Michael B. Jordan playing Adonis Creed. Great artwork by this guy. I think this stuff is investable. I don't know what you think about what I've said so far, but feel free to chime in on either the Kyler Smith stuff or just the officially licensed stuff. Like what kind of hits you as you look at this?
No, I'm definitely going to check out the Kyler Smith. I think more so than the officially licensed Topps brands that came out when I was a kid. Because I remember having Rocky II cards, and I remember seeing, cards for Major League as almost publicity. It seemed, swag. But the Kyler Smith, is right sort of in that sort of sweet spot of, taking the fun of, having fun with what we're doing here. It's like taking an artist rendering of the potential sort of image of a cinematic athlete if he was an actual athlete. So even I was looking at that list, I saw Thunder Lips, and he was like sort of on the cutting room floor, because then I'm like, well, is professional wrestling, do we consider that a actual sport, or is it more of performance, like acting? So Thunder Lips would have made the list, but then you open it up to others. Then you start adding, well, then we got to add, Andre the Giant, if you add Thunder Lips. Yeah. And so then, or not, what's his name? Jack Black's character, Nacho Libre. So the idea of taking these and presenting them, or, staging.
So Jason just kind of froze up there. I want to say, Ryan Elliott, thanks for the comment. He says he has a lead Tasso and a Nate card from the Kyler Smith set. Great set. These are all sold out on Kyler's website. All of the Ted Lasso cards are sold out on Kyler Smith's website, but they are selling on the secondary market for hundreds of dollars, or asking price in a couple $100. Nate, the Nate card, the seller wants 175 for it. I think he'll probably get close to that. He or she'll get close to that. Jason Sudeikis as Ted Lasso and as Led Tasso are both going for around $200. Even a Coach Beard card going for a couple $100. Sorry, Jason. We'll get you back. I'll get you back here in a second. Jesus Shuttlesworth was on Jason's list. So someone is selling a Kyler Smith He Got Game Jesus Shuttlesworth movie art card out of 90 for $45. So let's take a look and see if that lines up with what I'm talking about in terms of making a play. So you can actually get the Jesus Shuttlesworth still available on Kyler's website for $20. I'm not sure if that's the out of 90 or not. Okay, we got Jason back. Sorry, we lost you for a second. You were talking about Thunder Lips. So let's go ahead and finish your thought.
I was just saying, Thunder Lips, I saw the card. It looks fun at the least to purchase, but my segue was then into not including professional wrestling on this list because it opens the whole can of worms as far as, is professional wrestling a real sport? I know you believe it is, but we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you're referring to my time with TNA Wrestling and Impact Wrestling, I believe. Right. Created a fantasy game for them back in the day. Fun. So that was fun. Jason was on my list of beta testers for that. So so Rocky, the Rocky release we talked about a minute ago, officially licensed Topps cards. Those definitely are being purchased on the secondary market and even in some cases graded at PSA. So here's an Apollo Creed 1979 PSA 9 that sold for $100 on July 4th. So, I mean, this is an area of, let's call it sports card investing. That's what it is. These are cinematic athletes with officially licensed cards. And in some cases, really popular artist renderings that are going, that are transacting on the secondary market, and in some cases on the primary market with the artist drops. And then they're in some cases being graded at PSA. So like a good example is, this Apollo Creed card, somebody either found it or this is a newer PSA slab. So somebody would have found it recently or purchased it recently, ripped it out of a pack of maybe something that they found in their attic or in their closet. It was still in good condition. They had it graded at PSA and it got a 9. So that's a play. Another play that I wanted to bring up, I actually put an offer on this card. So back to Roy Kent. This is a third tier of card, because it is not a Kyler Smith card and is not an officially licensed card, but it does have value because it was signed by the actor as the actor. So this is different than the Drago card, because the Drago card was an officially licensed card signed by the actor. But this Roy Kent card, no, not this one. I already showed that one. This one right here. Brett Goldstein is the actor. Brett Goldstein signed a card that is not an officially licensed card. Somebody just made up this actually pretty good looking, pretty good job by the person who, took a screenshot of Roy Kent and then made a card out of it in Photoshop with a back. Normally would not be worth anything, maybe a couple dollars on eBay, as a lot of these other ones are that I haven't talked a lot about, but that are on my list. But had it signed by the actor and then authenticated, the autograph has been authenticated by PSA. So I did go, this picture looked a little shady. So I did go to psa.com/cert and I did type in this certification number and verify that this is in fact, the autograph has been authenticated by PSA, which makes it an investable card. So this card did sell actually for $249.99. which is a big sell. And there are 2 more available. I put an offer in on one at $212 and the guy countered at $235. I'm not sure I'm going to pull trigger, but I wasn't intrigued by the Roy Kent card along with the Drago card.
So are you intrigued as investment or?
I'm intrigued as an investment because I want to know when the 3rd season of Ted Lasso is coming out. I don't know if you have any inside information. I've Googled it. It doesn't seem like there's a release date for that yet, but it seems like a series that they have to continue. They left a little cliffhanger with Coach Nate last year. And so I think they're going to continue. So my thought is that based on Marvel cards, people have been able to prospect on Marvel characters that may have an upcoming Marvel release, and they've been able to make money on going back into past Upper Deck or other releases of Marvel cards and buy like an obscure character that's going to appear in an upcoming movie or be featured in an upcoming movie. And so my thought is like this Roy Kent card at $230 signed by the actor, PSA slabbed, could rise and I could flip it when the next season of Ted Lasso comes out. What do you think about that? You like it? Hate it? Jason's frozen again. I'm going to remove him from the stream and he'll come back. I kind of like it. I think it's a good idea. Let me know what you think in the comments. Another thing I wanted to point out is that a Ricky Wild Thing Vaughn tops, some of these are kind of hard to figure out whether or not they're officially licensed. But this card right here, 2014 Topps Archives Major League Charlie Sheen as Ricky Vaughn Wild Thing, sold for $67.77. Jason, I'll bring you back here in a second. I'm talking about this Ricky Wild Thing Vaughn card that sold for $67.77, and it says Topps on it, but the back Topps. So Major League, for those of you who don't know, there's a lot of artist cards out there. Beware of the artist cards. They're not going to be worth as much unless they're a Kyler Smith. They're not going to be worth as much as this officially licensed Topps major league release of Ricky Wild Thing Vaughn. Jason, I had asked you before you dropped off what you thought of my Roy Kent flip idea. Did you hear
No,
all
I
of it?
did not. So you're based
My
on
idea, I was talking about the Marvel releases, right? Where
okay,
people have made money prospecting on Marvel
right.
characters based on an upcoming movie. So
Mhm.
I'm thinking Roy Kent, of buying Roy Kent stuff now and then listing it on eBay upon the release of season 3 to see if it would increase in value.
It will. I bet you'll get another $10, 10 pounds. Um, but it sort of speaks to just what I find so fascinating is, I mean, you're obviously a Ted Lasso fan. And when we're buying these cards, I feel, at least from my perspective, that we're buying not just for investment. You know, when we're buying
Yeah,
baseball cards or basketball or football cards, it's primarily investment unless you're, you know, making a collection of your team. And so it speaks to me on this other level of the nostalgic investment we have with these cinematic heroes. And for me, um, some of these athletes should be ranked amongst the actual heroes. I know, you know, there's no comparison to Muhammad Ali's story, his life, and Rocky, because Muhammad Ali actually existed. But if we look at it purely from a emotional investment that we have, I feel we're more emotionally invested with some of these heroes than the actual um, athletes among us.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is, like, if you're, you know, if you're trying to hype yourself up before something, and if your go-to is music or even a clip from a movie, if you know, even if you're at the, like, I remember going to the Predators games when we were in Nashville, they would, between penalties, they would play Rocky 2, and the moment when Adrian tells Rocky to win before the training sequence. These are moments that we connect with as well. Um,
Yeah, and Ryan Elliott agrees with you. Thanks, Ryan. He says, I agree with Jason. I could probably rank Rocky in the emotional investment category in the top 5 boxers of all time. And I think Jason and Ryan both bring up a great point in that when you think, so it makes me think, because of the point that you guys are making, and there is this collectability, like I may not, if I do buy the Roy Kent card, I may not sell it because of the reason that you're talking about. And it would be, yeah, maybe it gets me pumped up, but maybe it just reminds me of like laughing with my family. And like, I just, that's another form of, wanting to have a keepsake or a collectible. And so, the point is that when, like, what we've seen with sports cards, like the traditional sports cards of real life athletes, the reason why the market has boomed so much is really actually because of the collector. The end collector holds the card, which then allows there to be a market, because otherwise it would just be people continuing to flip the card until somebody's left holding the bag on something that doesn't have any value anymore. And then the market collapses because there is no collectability to it. And so we've seen that happen with some other markets that aren't related necessarily to physical collectibles. But like, I think what you guys are saying is that these people buying these cards, or if you guys were to buy a card, you might just hold it for these reasons, whatever reason. To me, that speaks of like possibly the beginning of a market that is solidified by the collector, but grows and allows there to be the investor and the flipper on top of that, like the way that the sports card market has materialized up until this point. So I'm really interested to see, like, I think this is like a brand new prospecting market to me, and maybe some long-term holds. Like, I think this person, I'd be curious to try to interview someone who's made a purchase like this one. So, like, for example, I knew that before Jason put together this list, and it got me thinking of the cards related to these cinematic athletes. It's a different category than what we have on nooffseason.com right now. What we have on nooffseason.com right now is a celebrity card category. And so a guy before Jason's list and before this conversation, I would have thought of this card, this Adam Sandler 2008 Upper Deck auto movie icons Letterman out of 8. It's like basically a patch auto, but the letter is from a character on Jason's list, Paul Crew. So this is actually a Paul Crew card from The Longest Yard, right, Jason?
Right. So I had.
So he's on there for The Longest Yard.
Well,
so this is right.
Well, played by Burt Reynolds in the original. So I do not have the one yes.
Okay, so you on your list was you meant as the original, but actually Adam Sandler. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is from the remake.
Yes,
with Adam Sandler. Correct. And what's cool about for those of you who are my audience is basically sports card investors, so you guys will all understand what I'm talking about. This is what we would see, let's say from a Joe Burrow jersey, and it would be maybe the U from Joe Burrow's jersey where he's signed the U, and it's out of 8. This is the Paul Crew Adam Sandler version of that card, so it fits the celebrity card category, but it also fits the cinematic athlete category that Jason's talking about. And it's interesting to me. It's just, you see how now you've got a card like this. Like I said, I'd like to talk to somebody who's made a purchase like this or multiple purchases like this and interview them on the show, or make a comment if you have on the video, because I think it's an interesting dialogue to talk about the collectability and maybe the future as this potentially could be a long-term investment for a cultural icon like Adam Sandler, but also cinematic athlete like Paul Crew on a patch auto out of 8 made by Upper Deck, which is a recognizable company. So this one caught my eye as well. And I think that's why it was sold for $430. So Jason, other guys that have cards that are on your list, let me know if any of this surprises you. So there's some Roy Hobbs cards that have sold. These are just artist cards that have sold for about $3.50. There's no Gladiator cards, but there's a Russell Crowe card that sold for $10. Billy D. Williams has a card that has nothing to do with Bingo Long, sold for $3. There is a 2015 Panini Americana set that has both Billy D. Williams and James Earl Jones cards in it. Obviously, they're both more valuable. They both have more valuable Star Wars licensed cards than they do Bingo Long. You probably would have known that. Sure. Another notable one, Ralph Macchio's Leaf Pop Century. That's one thing we haven't talked about yet, is Leaf Pop Century. So, Jason, I don't know if you're familiar with Leaf Pop Century, but Leaf is a brand that you're probably familiar with. They've had pro sports licenses in the past. They currently hold no licenses for anything, but what they do is they just make deals with individuals. And so they make basketball, baseball, football, soccer, hockey, tennis cards. They make cards of athletes, but so there'd be like a Giannis basketball card autographed by Giannis, but it can't have the Milwaukee Bucks logo on it, and it can't have the any kind of NBA logo on it. So it doesn't sell for as much, but it still sells because it's a Giannis auto. So what Leaf decided to do is go out and sign a bunch of individuals that have been in pop culture, and then do a release called Leaf Pop Century. So they sell like hobby boxes of Leaf Pop Century that you can open, and you can get, you might get somebody that no one's ever really heard of. You might get somebody from Stranger Things or Harry Potter or something that's like hot or always going to be hot. And you might get a guy like Ralph Macchio, who then would have to appeal to somebody maybe more from our demographic who's familiar with the Karate Kid. But this sold for $49. So Ralph Macchio autograph, sold for $49. Doesn't say anything about the Karate Kid, but it's out of 10. So there's some scarcity to it. And actually, no, it's still open. It's going to sell. I stand corrected. So as of now, there's still 8 hours left in this auction, and it's going to sell for at least $49. So if you want to bid on this, Jason,
I might, but I might.
Number 6 on your list, Daniel LaRusso.
I know, but it's Ralph Macchio.
That's not Daniel LaRusso.
Exactly.
Ralph Macchio. So actually, that brings up a question. As somebody who would potentially be interested in this, would you bid on this card, or would you go find a Daniel LaRusso item to bid on?
I would do not the actor. I mean, would you rather meet Rocky or Sylvester Stallone? I mean, I guess the question is, who are you investing in emotionally? Is it the actor? Generally not. So yes, I think for me, I would be more in tuned with the Kyler Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, even there's Reggie Jackson from Naked Gun. Who are some of these other ones on here?
So Sensei LaRusso sold out.
Yeah.
You'd have to buy that on eBay, which you can find, but it's going to be more than $20. And then, this is a cool one. Billy Bean and Peter Brand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really wanted the Zach Morris, and then I saw that was sold out.
Oh, yeah. He didn't make the list, but AC Slater.
Varsity track and field.
I know.
Was there a reason why you left him off?
No, I think that I just only wanted one athlete from Saved by the Bell. I don't think I could handle two.
Was AC Slater?
Well, he was more because he was more, I think, wrestling and I want to say basketball, and then he became their coach in like the later.
Yeah, was he all state too or something?
Yeah.
Was he like actually a good athlete where Zach probably just smoked weed or something on the track and field team?
Exactly. And it's interesting, the research, there are people who cobble together the statistics of these athletes. Like if you look up Rocky Balboa statistics or Apollo Creed, someone, lists the not technical knockouts and the fights, and they all had like 40 fights, 39 TKOs, So,
did that come into play when you were looking at, like, say, Drago versus Creed? Or
yeah, I mean the one of the comments that Drago should have been higher than Creed because Drago actually killed the champion in the ring, regardless of morality coming into play here, but just purely by King of the Hill component.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's just, Apollo was the champ, unseated by Rocky, came back, coached Rocky. And I think, maybe my, Apollo connection versus, Ivan Drago played a part. So maybe I probably was a little bit biased.
Okay, so I got a question to ask you before we wrap up, and I'm gonna give you my answer first, so it'll give you a little bit of time to think about it because we hadn't talked about this. If you had to make a sleeper play, investment play on buying a card of a cinematic athlete, anything that we've talked about today, any way, shape, or form, be it a Kyler Smith, be it a officially licensed thing or certified by PSA, whatever, who would it be and why would you do it? And I'm going to give you one of my sleeper plays real quick. I think Pam Beasley, for example, for the Scranton volleyball team, could be a sleeper play at $20, available on KylerSmith.com right now. This is not an advertisement for Kyler Smith, by the way. I just think like this guy's cards are clearly investable because the proof is in the data. They've sold on the secondary market for way more than $20 multiple times. I see The Office being re-released everywhere on all streaming services. I talk to people much younger than me on occasion and find that they are in love with the show the same way I was, like, 10, 15 years ago, whenever that was. And I think that when you see like Rainn Wilson's Pop Century autograph cards selling for hundreds of dollars, and it's not even Dwight Schrute, it's Rainn Wilson. I could see like some diamond in the roughs being like a Pam Beasley, Kyler Smith limited edition for $20, and then that immediately listing that on eBay. Maybe not immediately. I think again, you have to wait until that actually sells out, but you could go buy the rest of them to make it sell out. And then you could list them on eBay. And I think that they would go for $75 to $100 potentially over time each. So just thinking about ways to help people make money off of this cinematic athlete scenario. Pam Beasley is not known as a volleyball player, so this is very different than your list. But it's just an example of, I think, where this can go. Kind of fun. So do you have like a sleeper play, like a play that you would make where you would say, okay, this is a person on my list. I would try to find X card, or I would buy this card that you've talked about today and I would hold it, or I would try to, sell it, that kind of thing. Anything stick out to you as something you'd be interested in?
It's interesting. I was the chasing of future nostalgia trends. Office was during COVID was a big deal, and the memes with Office made a lot of headlines of just especially when Netflix was getting rid of it. So Office is front and center. If you look at Friends, is similar. So the Joey card sticks out, and it's, so you're really chasing, which is interesting, nostalgia, like what's going to be nostalgically front and center for us to invest emotionally in again. The thing I was thinking about, in the 80s and 90s, sports movies were king. There were so many sports movies of the 90s and the 80s. The 70s sports movie were more character-driven dramas. There wasn't a ton of, that were starting to emerge in the mid to late 70s with sports. Burt Reynolds is an example, or even Bad News Bears, breaking away of the underdog. Again, Rocky was sort of the beginning of that type of underdog sport film, or at least not the beginning, but sort of this second flowering of it. And it sort of disappeared. Most sports movies are biopics now. But Ted Lasso, you talk about the sort of appreciation of that card or that show and the cards that are being created, just because there's just so much at play. The reason Ted Lasso did so well, I think, other than being phenomenally created characters and a show, and it also was at a time when this world needed some level of authentic optimism, and so there's a lot at play. If we're looking at future, if you look at Stranger Things, for example, we know there's a show coming out in 2024, season 5. I was trying to think, is Steve Harrington an athlete? Is there any athletes? If we think Dungeons and Dragons, I did include the Queen's Gambit in there. So if we include Dungeons and Dragons as a sport, then maybe Eddie Munson's character from Stranger Things will have value. So I don't know. For me, the idea of investing our hard-earned dollar into the sort of prominence of these cards, I don't think a Zach Morris card or a Pam Beasley will be sold for $12.6 million ever. But I think what's more important is that amount of, I think, emotional investment is a personal thing. You buy that Pam Beasley because you like, The Office, and if you flip it, you might make $4. The Roy Kent that you want is because you love that show, and it's something that you can put on your wall. You can make, again, why people collect is a whole different conversation. If it's a place of, you want the whole series, buying up all autographed Ted Lasso cards is, if that's your thing, then it's a great collection to start. So I think it's a different type of an investment that we're talking about with these types of cards. And that's more of the sort of emotional connection we have to our cinematic heroes.
Okay, I really like that. I think you're right. I think you've sort of, I'm in this mindset
Ted
of
Lasso Roy Kent card, it's just so you have it and you could look at it, smile.
Yeah. I think you've sort of convinced me of the, because I get one track minded on the investment side and the flippability, the play, because that's what we do at no offseason all the time with the real life athletes is like, who can you make money off of in terms of an investment? It's like daily fantasy sports basically.
Right.
And so, but you got me super excited with your list, and you got me, you opened my mind up to this new segment of the market, this new niche, which is cinematic athletes and their cards, like not the actors cards, but cards related to specifically the cinematic athlete. And then you've got this multitude of factors. You've got not only the show or the movie and the relatability or nostalgia behind that, the love for that, but you've also got the actor or actress. You've got the sidekick, the other characters in the show that you talked about earlier. And then you've got the card manufacturer, the autograph, the scarcity, like the other more traditional factors that sports card investors are familiar with. So it's really, really intriguing. And I'm going to definitely create some cinematic player profiles, athlete profiles on nooffseason.com and add them to the sports card investment report. Nice. So for any of you who go to the site, you will see those. So I'm excited about doing that. There's definitely enough sales data based on my research off of your list that I've seen to do that. And there's actually one more category of card that I saved for last because I think it's its own outstanding story in American history, and we're all familiar with it. And I'm going to bring it back onto my screen here. So for those of you who are listening, I'm bringing up a League of Their Own search on eBay related to the Gina Davis character, Dottie Hinson. Is that correct, Jason?
Yes.
So Dottie was the number one A League of Their Own character on your list. And there are officially licensed movie cards. Tom Hanks, Gina Davis, Madonna. A sheet of 4 of those cards sold for $50. But what I was even more intrigued by, not only are there cards of the cinematic athletes that we're familiar with from the movie, right, but there are actually AAGPBL cards of the real female baseball players. You might have known this already, Jason, because I know you're a huge baseball fan and obviously movie guy. But as you can see here on my screen, I mean, multiple sales of athletes, the real athletes, Joanne McComb, who these characters were based off of, Anita Foss, Marie Mansfield. These are real. Ann Garman. Now I don't know these athletes, but along with the May Mortabito, Jimmy Duggan, Dottie Hinson, Kit, there's those character cards, but there are also the real athletes which the characters are based on have cards, some of which have been autographed. And so I think you've got this A League of Their Own dual collectability going on here. There was one before I hand it over to you to kind of bring this home with A League of Their Own. Back to Kyler Smith. Kyler did a kit card that I think is already sold out, or maybe not. There's a Kyler Smith kit card as well that's really cool. That I think you'd have to get on the secondary market, or maybe it hasn't dropped yet. I'm not sure. But anyway, what's your thought on what's going on here with all of these multiple? Is this something you knew about when you put together your list?
No, I mean, The League of Their Own is one of my top just sports movies, baseball movies, obviously for just the historical nature but also just the the underdog element in the sense of females and baseball players back in World War II era. The fact that it's obviously the TV series that just was released based on the movie. I forget what streaming network, because there's like 12 dozen of them. I don't know if it's Hulu or Amazon, I forget. But the point being, it's great. It's one of those sort of pieces of memorabilia or collectible cards that are again sparking interest in that era of our national pastime. So again, the connection that we have emotionally leads us down to the value historically of these athletes. So there is this correlation between our emotional investment and what we invest, of our hard-earned dollar with those cards. And you don't see this. You always hear the stories of the fathers who pass their collections off to their sons. It's like, I have a Pete Rose, or here's a George Brett or Reggie Jackson, but rarely do athletes or parents pass down, here's my Rocky 2 card. I'm sure it happens, but it just goes to you getting that Roy Kent card just because it makes you smile. And I think that's what this list is too. It's to sort of not take collecting so seriously as an investment to flip. In that in and of itself is a game, and there's enjoyment in that. Don't get me wrong, but it's also just owning a piece of your nostalgic past, or your nostalgia, and framing. So 10 years from now, Ted Lasso will be a footnote in your life, but you'll have that card to smile at.
Absolutely. And phenomenal job putting together the list. Really brought a smile to my face. Encourage all of you to go check out Jason's list on Medium.
More to come. Working on some new stuff. So we'll
we're gonna have you back on the show. We're gonna do more special editions with Jason Glassman. We've got a lot more to talk about. And we will maybe even talk regularly about updates to his list and sports card data related to cinematic athletes. But Jason, anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
That's it. Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, this was awesome. Appreciate your time. Glad we were able to make something happen. We had talked about having you on for a long time, and this will be the first of many. So appreciate everyone for watching and or listening, and would love to hear in the comments what you think of our entire discussion, any plays that you might be making, any shows or movies that you are interested in purchasing cards from the athletes, anything that you think Jason got right or wrong. And we'll follow up with you. Again, look out at nooffseason.com for these profiles. You can get the premium free for a year. Email Paul at nooffseason.com for the details on how to do that. And we are going to hook you up. So thanks everybody for watching and listening to this Sports Card Strategy Show special edition, top cards for cinematic athletes. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Yeah.